All right, let's make an embroidered plushie. So I folded my felt in half and then traced that to make sure my design wasn't too big. Then I'm folding my paper in half to make sure my heart is symmetrical. Next, I am sketching out my design on my piece of paper, and I'm keeping it very simple, especially if you're new to embroidery. Next, I'm going to trace the shape on my felt, and I'm going to do that twice. Then I need to cut it out with some fabric scissors. Make sure they're fabric scissors, otherwise they're going to be tough to cut. Now I'm sketching the design on my felt. I'm actually only sketching the M because that's the only thing that I really need to trace. Everything else I can just kind of eyeball. Threading my needle, doubling it up, and then tying a knot at the end. Zoom in so you could see the knot tying. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to start stitching the M first. So the first thing I'm doing is stitching the little foot, which is called a serif. Then for the lines of the M, I'm going to be doing something called a split stitch. So watch this. I'm going to do one stitch like normal. And then since my thread is doubled up, there's actually two threads there. So then when I poke my needle through, I'm actually poking it in between the two threads. So I'm splitting the stitch. Get it? And so that's just gonna make it look a little fancier. Watch, I'm gonna do it again. Poke that needle right in between those stitches. There it goes. And back to fast forward. So after I finish stitching my M, then I am ending with a knot on the back, always, so it doesn't come unraveled. Next, I'm doing my little stars. So threading my needle just like normal, and to do the stars, I'm going to do a plus sign and then an X across the middle of the plus sign. So I'm going to zoom in here in a second so you can see how to do that. All right, zoom in. Here's a plus sign. So I do the vertical stitch for the plus sign and then a horizontal stitch for the plus sign. And those are a little bit longer stitches, but then when I do the X, that's going to be right up against the threads of the plus sign. So it makes a little like mid-century looking star. So I'm going to do those all over the place. And I tie a knot after each one. Now it's time to add some sparkles. So I'm just picking out some colors of sequins, laying them out, figuring out where I want them, and then I'll set them off to the side, and then I need to stitch each one on individually. So here's how I do that. I'll lay the sequins on the felt, and then poke the needle up through the middle of the sequins, and then down to the side. And I do that 3 times, so I have 3 stitches holding the sequin down. You don't have to do it 3 times, but it does make it lay flat, and I think it just looks nice. It makes it look a little bit more symmetrical, but it's up to you. Make sure that you tie a knot once the sequin is stitched down so it doesn't fall off later. and keep adding sequins to your heart's desire. Once I have my design all stitched, it's time to sew my 2 pieces of felt together. So I cut a long piece of thread, and I started the thread on just 1 piece of felt, but then when I poke back through, I'm going through both pieces. And so I'm going to be stitching, it's called a blanket stitch. And so to do that, it's like a whip stitch, so you're only poking up through the bottom each time, but you see that loop it makes when I start to pull it? I'm going to poke my needle through that loop and then pull it tight. And I'm going to do that for each stitch. It takes a little bit longer, but it looks really good, and it helps secure that seam so that you don't have stuffing falling out. So I'm going to stitch almost all the way around. I'm just going to leave a small opening so that I can stuff it in just a minute. Now I'm stuffing my plushie, and then once it is as full as I want it to be, then I just continue stitching, and of course end with a double knot, and then I just kind of tucked the tails of my thread into the plushie as best as I could to hide it. And that's it. Look at that beautiful plushie.